Alert Weather Extra, we continue to track Hurricane Beryl as it continues moving through the Caribbean. Plus, we talk about rain in our area as we head into the 4th of July holiday.
WBRC Fox 6 News. First Alert Weather Extra starts now.
And thank you for staying with us for Weather Extra, joined again by Tania and JP joining us today. And we've all been talking about this hurricane, and it's just... It resembles a lot of that season. You know, we talked about Dennis was one of the earlier hurricanes to form this early in the season, and we know how that season turned out.
Yeah, I was working. I was working in Huntsville when Dennis was formed down there, and got to actually cover that from the Gulf Coast. So very familiar with Dennis. We kind of knew this was coming. The forecasters, both with CSU and NOAA, indicated it was going to be a very active hurricane season. Sea surface temperatures so hot.
And the environment's been very favorable for development there across the Caribbean. Let's go ahead and talk about the track. And Tania, you were mentioning earlier, just looking at this thing from space, I mean, just the satellite imagery is just absolutely incredible when you look at this thing. But first off, just to show you this hourly forecast for this evening, you can see we're dealing with dry conditions at this time, but certainly nothing like what's happening there down across the tropical regions. And let's go ahead. I wanted to bring this in and show you. This is a current satellite view. This is an enhanced infrared satellite, and this is about as textbook as it gets. You can see the hurricanes taking on that buzzsaw shape. It's now in the Caribbean, winds of 150. We go to 155. We're talking Cat 5 hurricane. It doesn't get any stronger. And look at the wind gusts. They're showing some peak gusts, 185 miles per hour, moving west-northwest at 21. And the forecast guidance on this shows the hurricane possibly impacting Jamaica, at least the northern part of the northern half of the circulation there, that northern quadrant. You can see there's possibly a Category 3. There's Jamaica as it approaches the center, may stay just south, but the north end with all that rainfall, and then it moves into the Yucatan. And a lot of times when these systems move into this part of Mexico, they kind of struggle to regain that circulation, but there's a chance that it could end up still a Cat 1 or a tropical storm as it moves back into the southwest Gulf of Mexico. Then the question, where does it go? A lot of long-range data kind of follows that last system. Remember Alberto, and takes it more into Mexico, perhaps southern Texas, but way on down the road, middle of next week, some of this moisture may kind of get pulled in across the southeast region, might actually keep the afternoon storm chances going, and we could have some really heavy downpours in that sort of setup there towards the middle of next week, so we'll have to watch out for some of the remnants possibly moving our way. But at least now through the 4th, no impacts, no direct impacts. As we go into the weekend at this time, it looks like no impacts, no direct impacts happening there. But this looks at some of the model data, and you can see why we call this the spaghetti plot, because we're looking at all the scenarios, but most of the guidance is really locked in on this track into this part of the Gulf here to the south and west. But that ridge that we've been talking about, that bubble of hot weather, that drier air that's taking over right now, is going to keep at least that tropical threat to the south for now. Another system down the road, however, could become the next named system, which is Debbie, the D-named storm. We actually had Tropical Storm Chris that made a landfall briefly developed during the early morning, made a landfall in Mexico, but we might see this system take shape, and again, another system that might end up over the Caribbean. But we're going to talk with JP more on this coming up. We actually check in with the hurricane hunters. Now let's go to Tania.
Thanks, Wes. Hurricane Beryl producing catastrophic winds and life-threatening storm surge across parts of the southern Windward Islands after making landfall earlier this morning. The dangerous Category 4 hurricane struck Carriacou Island in Grenada as it continued its Caribbean trek. There have been multiple reports of downed trees, flooded streets, power outages, and storm surge flooding. In Barbados, residents have taken the warnings by the government to seek shelter if necessary at any of the island's 33 hurricane shelters. Richard Foster is one of them, and he shares how he's feeling.
Decided to come here because with this weather system at a Category 4 and its location, I am not taking any chances with it. I prefer to be here, ride it out, and then tomorrow see what happens.
Beryl will continue to move across the Windward Islands and into the southeastern and central Caribbean Sea from tonight and into Wednesday. This also comes as Tropical Storm Chris made landfall in Mexico earlier this morning. Maximum sustained winds were near 40 miles per hour with higher gusts than that. Heavy rainfall and flooding expected over portions of eastern Mexico, and Chris has since dissipated after making landfall.
Well, this is the WC-130J model. You can see it fly right across the screen in front of me. It is the choice aircraft of the U.S. Air Force hurricane hunters. They use the airplane, they drop instruments out to gather weather data. Tonight we speak to Major Will Simmons. He's a U.S. Air Force hurricane hunter and actually a former TV meteorologist.
Well, I've heard some people describe it as a bumpy car wash or a roller coaster through a car wash, but definitely some moderate turbulence in there. So if you fly on a passenger airline, a lot of people are familiar with light chop, we call it, or just some light bumps along the way. But of course, as you get closer and closer to the eye wall of a hurricane, things get a little more interesting. So moderate turbulence around the eye wall usually. And it also depends if the storm is strengthening or weakening, kind of what phase it's in. But a maturing, growing storm, it can throw you around pretty good. We can gain altitude plus or minus a couple hundred feet easily within a few seconds, depending on how the storm system is. And each storm kind of has its own characteristics. It really depends on the storm itself. A really mature hurricane sometimes can be actually pretty stable. Some fast winds, but sometimes the bumps aren't too bad with those stronger hurricanes. So we will drop these weather instruments that we call drop sons throughout the center of the hurricane, of course, called the eye wall, and then all the way around the storm, kind of the edges of it to paint a picture of what's going on. So we'll take measurements from wind speed, direction, dew point, temperature, and of course pressure. We want to get the pressure there in the center of the hurricane. So the name of the game is data minutes. The data that we collect goes to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. They process it, and then they can put it into their computer models to really help overall improve the forecast of intensity and timing. And ultimately, it helps to help those forecasts and hopefully save lives. So depending on where the hurricane is, it can take us maybe 4 hours just to even get to the eye of a hurricane. And then we'll delay within that storm maybe another 4 hours to collect our data and then fly back to Keesler in Biloxi, Mississippi, or wherever we are basing out of to put us closer to the storm. So I've flown missions up to in a little over 12 hours is about my longest. And that's a long time in a C-130 at low altitude. Fly down low, that lower structure at 10,000 feet. If it's maybe a tropical storm or a Cat 1, we sometimes fly those lower about 5,000 feet. But once it really starts to strengthen and gets a little stronger, with updrafts and downdrafts, we'll go ahead and climb up a little bit for more of a safety margin and penetrate the hurricane about 10,000 feet. And we start out around 180 knots going through the hurricane. We call that our rough air penetration speed. And the one that always comes to mind first was Hurricane Irma. That was it made it to Category 5 strength. So far, it's been the only Category 5 hurricane I've flown into, but it's still just really impressed into my mind. I can picture it now, just flying through it at Category 5 strength. And it was, I believe it was a full moon that night or very close to it. So as soon as we broke into the eye from the eye wall, things really opened up. We broke out of the clouds and we looked up and around us. There was this beautiful stadium effect. You know, I hate to say the word beautiful, but sometimes with nature, talking about these natural processes, I mean, that word comes to mind. It was really this beautiful stadium effect just all around us, these clouds. And we could look up, the sky was clear. We could see tons of stars. So that one definitely comes to mind when I flew through that. First and only Category 5 so far. Wind speeds, if I remember correctly, were over 165 knots. So Category 5 strength. But it really wasn't that rough of a ride just because it was so mature and stable. But the sight, what I saw, was something I hope to never forget.
And Major Simmons says he has done 129 eye wall penetrations in the C-130. And when he's not flying Hurricane Hunter missions, he is a 767 pilot for FedEx. And this is some of the data that the Hurricane Hunters actually collect in real time. That data is sent to the National Hurricane Center. It's ingested into forecast models, the same models that we show on television to help give you an idea where these storms are going to be going. In 30 seconds, we will take a quick look at your forecast and talk about the weather we typically see in July. We'll see you in a few minutes. And we continue with First Alert Weather Extra, and we are tracking the tropics, looking at the Global Forecast System model, what some call the GFS. We are going to be looking at our computer model showing Beryl here over the next several days. There's the circulation, and watch what happens as we extend this out about a week. We track this right across the Yucatan, stays to the south of Cuba, most likely just to the south of Jamaica. Yucatan, a lot of rain, flooding rains there, and then high pressure to the north is going to weaken. That's going to likely allow some of that moisture from this hurricane to spread into the southeastern U.S. Probably next week, we'll see some increased rain chances from this system.
And as we start a new month, meteorologist Matt Daniel joins us now with the typical weather patterns we can see in July.
Well, happy first day of July. Let's recap a bit about what happened in June, and we'll talk about what to expect going into this upcoming month. So here we go. Of course, June, pretty dry around here. We had some rain initially, but then it just got pretty dry and hot. So that means we have abnormally dry conditions shaded in yellow, and even a moderate drought developing in parts of southern portions of Shelby County, going to southern Talladega and into Chilton and Coosa County. So we could use some rain, but right now we're dry. And you can see the rainfall totals in June. Birmingham didn't even record 2 inches of rain. Normally we'll pick up over 4 3/4. Tuscaloosa picked up over 4 inches, so not too bad. Getting close to that average for June. And Anniston, not bad at all. He picked up over 4 3/4 of an inch of rain, which is a little bit above average for the month of June. So congratulations to you. So let's talk about the rain for the entire year so far. So for Tuscaloosa, typically we'll pick up about 28.5 inches of rain, and we're pretty close to that. So right now we got a small surplus, but for Birmingham, we're seeing that deficit. You can see so far we're getting close to almost 6 inches below average. So definitely could add some rain, and I think over the next, especially by the end of the week going to the weekend, we'll hopefully make up some of that. And in Anniston, pretty much close to average, so not too bad there. So let's talk about July. How much rain do we typically record in July? Well, over almost 5.5 inches of rain. In fact, July is considered one of our wettest months of the year. March is number 1. July is in second place. And July is also notorious for the heat. So it's probably no surprise, since we're in the heart of summer, that July is typically one of our hottest months. It's usually July and August. So our average high temperature is about 91 degrees and our average low is about 72. So it's usually our warmest morning temperatures in the month of June or in July and going into August. And then you'll notice those temperatures trend a little bit cooler by the time we go into September, where our average low is usually in the mid 60s. Of course, now that we're in the peak of the summer in July, we're starting to lose a little bit of daylight as we get closer to fall. So sunset this evening is at 8:01. By August 1st, sunsets at 7:46, and by September 1st, 7:11. So we're losing about almost a day of about a minute of daylight each day in July, and by August we're losing about 2 minutes of daylight in August. So sunrise tomorrow at 5:41. It's going to be at 6 o'clock by August 1st, and by September 1st, 6:21. So as you can tell, it's July. Get ready for more heat and humidity.
And welcome back into First Alert Weather Extra. And at this time, I was noticing some drier air that's moving in. I want to go over to the radar view here across the U.S. And I was noticing on one of our cameras there looking to the south, it looked like we might actually see some storms there happening to the south. I want to back the view out and down in the southeast Alabama, you see that, a couple of spotty showers, and there's actually some severe storms that were moving into places like Dothan and down into the Florida Panhandle. We'll check this out. You look at the view from Oak Grove and you can actually see the tops of those storms. You see that, those cloud tops way to the south there, and it's amazing sometimes just how tall these storms can grow and how far away. You can see the very top, you can see the anvil there from storms. That's way over the horizon down in far south Alabama and down along the coast. But right now for us, we have temperatures in the 90s. We're dry. The drier air is taking over. So as we go through the overnight hours, there's a chance we could actually see those lows in the 60s for some of us early tomorrow morning. You can see around 6 a.m., 68 Jasper, 70 around Gaston, 67 around Fayette. Might get a couple of pop-up showers in the afternoon. Unfortunately, you can really feel it out through this evening. It doesn't feel as muggy, but tomorrow it comes back in a hurry, and it's going to start to feel more humid. Heat index topping 100, and again, maybe a pop-up shower to the south. We've got a north breeze right now. The wind becomes southeasterly for Tuesday and Wednesday. A few scattered showers in the mix, though, for Wednesday, but a lot of us will still enjoy some dry weather if you have the day off there for the 4th of July holiday in the week. Looks like plenty of time to spend out on the lake in the pool. The wet weather is going to be very, very hit or miss, at least through Wednesday, but we will see a gradual increase in those chances for afternoon storms. But the First Alert heat index forecast, and you can see it ramps up here back into that 105 plus territory Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it is certainly going to feel like July. And we've got thunder on the mountain coming up right here, and it looks like for Thursday those temperatures will tumble into the 80s. Isolated showers in the evening, possibly a storm there. That's mostly going to be dissipating into Thursday night. We're watching Beryl. We still have the 4 o'clock advisory we're watching right now. We'll have a 7 o'clock advisory coming out very soon. But the latest track on this shows a landfall in the Yucatan on Friday, and then it may end up over the southwest Gulf. I mentioned in the long range there's a chance some moisture from this could end up around the middle of the week, possibly lifting across Texas, maybe parts of Louisiana. And typically when you end up with all that tropical moisture, what that does is that leads to, of course, the increased risk for some heavier downpours, localized flooding, and that's often the case this time of the year, especially with some of these slow-moving afternoon thunderstorms. So we'll have to watch out for that, not only next week, but also for this weekend, some heavier pockets of rain. Still very hot and steamy at times, so be ready for some hot weather, certainly feeling like the 4th of July, Tania.
Oh yeah, listen, it's looking hot, right? Hot for this week and a little humid too. We get a little bit of a break tomorrow, but still pretty muggy outside. So make sure you're drinking that water, wearing that sunscreen, and taking breaks out in that sun. Here we are looking 6 to 10 days out from now. This is July 7th through July 11th. Across the U.S., a good mixture. Well, I kind of say a mixture, but it's about half and half. Some areas seeing more below average rainfall, some of us seeing above average rainfall, and that's including us here in Alabama, and more specifically central Alabama. We've got more rain in our forecast as we go throughout this month. We just getting started, but take a look at the heat. We're still see above average temperatures July 7th through July 11th. So the heat is sticking around for us, especially at the coast. Notice how it's a little bit darker red and orange as you're heading down to the beach. So get ready for the heat. If you're going to be out there, you also want to make sure you're wearing the sunscreen, taking breaks, recognizing any heat exhaustion symptoms like dizziness and nausea. So just keep that in mind. But you're watching First Alert Weather Extra. Keep in mind that things can, after the 7-day forecast, and will possibly change. So we'll continue to give you updates right here on Weather Extra. Don't go anywhere, though. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's a big week for travel, and I know a lot of folks on the 4th of July week are headed right here to the Alabama Gulf Coast or the Florida Panhandle. Looks like we're finally getting some decent surf out there. They're flying the yellow flags, so folks are starting to populate the beaches. That's the way it looked as of this morning. 88 degrees. It was 88 degrees at 10 o'clock this morning, and our temperature readings continue to warm on up there at the beaches. So a low rip current threat. The yellow flags are expected to hang out there going into tomorrow, for Wednesday, for Thursday. The Gulf water temperature, a toasty 84 degrees or warmer out there in many locations. So let's take a look. We could get a few scattered showers at the beaches going into the next few days, but things look like they're going to be drying out a little bit as we get into the 4th of July. You can see about 85 in the Gulf shores there at 4 p.m. At Pensacola, 90 degrees, 89 into Destin, 89 degrees into Panama City come Thursday afternoon and early evening. And then on Friday, we're in the 80s in most of those locations. A little bit more cloud cover there on Friday, but I still wouldn't cancel any beach plans. So we start out with some scattered showers at the Gulf Coast beaches, but then things begin to taper off a little bit. When you're down to 20, 30%, somewhere in there, a lot of times the sea breeze will blow a lot of those showers inland. But you can see our highs at the beaches are actually a little cooler than they have been here at home. We're expecting to get into the mid-90s over the next few days. So a little cooler at the beaches, and of course you can always take a splash and cool things off a little bit. Let's take a look at your forecast going into the mountains. This is basically for the Smoky Mountains, and they almost have a reverse of what's going on at the beaches. We start out with a dry forecast, and as we get into Thursday and Friday, a little bit wetter there. You can see some scattered showers starting to develop there at the mountains. So again, we start out with dry conditions, a little warmer at the mountains than it is at the Alabama Gulf Coast. 30% chance of rain on Thursday, 4th of July. And then we see some scattered showers and thunderstorms going into the weekend. So be sure and take your rain gear with you if you're going to be hiking up in the mountains. Pay attention to your First Alert weather app. While we're mentioning that, let's go ahead and bring it on up. You can check the forecast wherever you're going, whether it's the beach, the mountains, or wherever it may be. You can take the forecast with you and just punch in the data, and it'll give you the latest forecast based on your proximity to your mobile device there. And you can also take some pictures. Scroll down to the very bottom and maybe submit some of the photos of your trip, and we might be able to share some of those right here on Weather Extra.
All right, and I believe we got the new advisory in, and when did you say 145? 155. So
wow, let's get up there.
Yeah, so we're watching Beryl. We'll be tracking that system for you tonight. Great having you here today, JP.
Yes.
And
always good. And of course, Beryl, we some of the data suggesting that we may end up with some rain from that system next week, or even a little bit more.
Yeah, some new model data coming in. So something we still need to pay close attention to. So check in with us tonight. We'll have updates first at 9.
Have a good evening.
See you.